Daniel, doesn't Mia always throw the best parties? Charlotte exclaimed, adjusting her sleek black dress as they walked up to Mia's mansion. The evening air was crisp and the mansion's lights shimmered warmly against the night sky. Daniel smiled, taking Charlotte's hand. She sure does. I'm looking forward to relaxing tonight. They entered the mansion, greeted by soft music and the murmur of guests mingling. Mia, in a stunning crimson gown, spotted them and hurried over with a bright smile. Daniel, Charlotte, so glad you could make it, she said warmly, hugging them both. Come on in. Drinks are flowing and dinner's almost ready. Charlotte's eyes twinkled with excitement as they walked through the grand foyer. This place is gorgeous, she whispered to Daniel, gazing around at the tasteful decor. I knew you'd love it, Daniel replied, scanning the room. Looks like quite the turnout tonight. They joined a group near the bar, where a server offered them glasses of champagne. Charlotte clinked her glass with Mia's. Thank you for inviting us, Mia. Everything looks amazing, she said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. Mia beamed, her eyes sweeping over the room. I'm thrilled you could come. It's been too long since we had a proper get-together. As the evening progressed, Daniel and Charlotte circulated among the guests, catching up with old friends and making new acquaintances. Charlotte's laughter floated through the air as she chatted animatedly with a couple they hadn't seen in years. Daniel watched her with a mixture of pride and a hint of concern. He leaned closer to Charlotte. Having fun? He asked softly, his eyes searching hers. Charlotte nodded, her smile bright. Absolutely, this is exactly what we needed. A night to unwind. I'm glad, Daniel replied, trying to shake off the unease that had been nagging at him since they arrived. Little did he know, this night would test their relationship in ways neither of them could have imagined. The evening began with a symphony of clinking glasses and the gentle murmur of conversation. Guests mingled in clusters, their laughter and banter filling the air with an infectious energy. Daniel and Charlotte found themselves immersed in the lively atmosphere, savoring the elegance of Mia's meticulously planned event. Charlotte's laughter rang out melodiously as she engaged in conversation with a group of guests near the bar. Daniel watched her from across the room, a fond smile playing on his lips. Despite his initial unease, he couldn't deny the joy sparkling in Charlotte's eyes. As the night progressed, Charlotte's attention seemed drawn to a tall, charismatic man named David. He exuded confidence and charm, effortlessly captivating those around him. Daniel observed them from a distance, his earlier unease resurfacing like a distant storm cloud on an otherwise clear night. Mia approached Daniel, her voice filled with warmth. Daniel, isn't this party fantastic? Charlotte looks like she's having a blast. Daniel nodded, his gaze flickering towards Charlotte and David. Yeah, she seems to be enjoying herself. Mia followed his gaze discreetly. David's quite the charmer, isn't he? I think they've hit it off. Daniel's smile faltered slightly. Yeah, they seem to be getting along. Mia placed a reassuring hand on his arm. Don't worry, Daniel. It's just a party. People mingle. Charlotte adores you. Daniel forced a smile, though his unease gnawed at him. Yeah, you're right. Throughout the evening, Daniel tried to join Charlotte and David's conversations, attempting to quell his growing apprehension. Each time, Charlotte introduced him warmly to David, who nodded politely but with a hint of intrigue in his eyes. As the clock ticked past midnight, Daniel found himself standing alone by the window, sipping his drink. He watched Charlotte and David sharing a laugh across the room, their heads close together in animated discussion. A knot tightened in Daniel's stomach, a silent plea for reassurance lingering on his lips. Everything okay? Mia's voice interrupted his thoughts, her concern palpable. Daniel turned to her, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, just enjoying the party. Mia studied him for a moment, her gaze piercing yet understanding. If you need anything, I'm here. Okay? Daniel nodded gratefully. Thanks, Mia. I appreciate it. But deep down, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that tonight would mark a turning point in their lives. A night when laughter masked deeper currents, and a charming stranger threatened the fragile threads of trust woven between husband and wife. As the night wore on, the music softened to a mellow hum, and the guests began to disperse into smaller groups. Daniel noticed Charlotte and David slipping away from the main crowd. Their voices hushed as they moved towards a secluded corner of the room. A pang of unease gripped Daniel's chest, but he hesitated, unwilling to believe his suspicions. "Where did Charlotte go?" Mia asked, joining Daniel near the dessert table. Daniel glanced around, his eyes searching for his wife. "I think she went over there," he replied, nodding towards the dimly lit corner where he last saw Charlotte and David. Mia followed his gaze, her brow furrowing slightly. "They've been chatting for quite a while now." "Yeah," Daniel muttered, his unease growing stronger. "I'm just going to check on her." Daniel discreetly made his way towards the corner, his footsteps muffled by the soft carpet. He paused just outside the alcove, heart pounding in his ears, as he listened to Charlotte's laughter mingling with David's deep voice. "You're incredible," David murmured, his tone intimate. Charlotte chuckled softly. "You're not so bad yourself." Daniel's breath caught in his throat as he peeked around the corner. There, in the dimly lit alcove, stood Charlotte and David, their bodies close, their faces illuminated by a flickering candle on a nearby table. His heart sank as he watched them share an intimate embrace, Charlotte's hand resting on David's chest, their faces inches apart. Time seemed to slow as Daniel processed the scene before him, the reality of Charlotte's betrayal crashing down like a tidal wave. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing, but there was no denying the truth staring him in the face. "Charlotte?" Daniel's voice cracked, barely a whisper. Charlotte and David jerked apart, their eyes widening in shock as they turned to see Daniel standing there, his expression a mixture of disbelief and anguish. "Daniel?" Charlotte stammered, her voice trembling. "I can explain." David took a step back, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Daniel's fists clenched at his sides, his jaw tight with suppressed emotion. "How long?" he managed to choke out, his voice thick with hurt. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears as she struggled to find words. "It's not what you think." But Daniel shook his head, his voice trembling with betrayal. "How could you do this to us, Charlotte? To me?" Mia appeared beside Daniel, her hand on his arm. "Daniel," he turned away from Charlotte, unable to bear the sight of her tears. Without another word, he walked away, leaving Charlotte and David standing in stunned silence, their hearts heavy with the weight of consequences yet to unfold. The air in the room felt heavy with tension as Daniel's footsteps echoed across the polished floor, his heart hammered in his chest, each beat a painful reminder of the betrayal he had just witnessed. Charlotte and David stood frozen, their faces pale with shock, as Daniel approached them with determined steps. "Daniel, please," Charlotte pleaded, her voice wavering as she reached out towards him. Daniel halted, just a few feet away, his eyes burning with a mixture of anger and hurt. He turned to face the guests, their expressions ranging from curiosity to discomfort, all eyes now on the unfolding drama. "Everyone, please excuse the interruption." Daniel's voice rang out, firm and controlled despite the storm raging within. "I have something I need to address." Mia moved forward, concern etched on her face. "Daniel, maybe we should." But Daniel raised a hand, silencing her gently. "No, Mia, this can't wait." He turned back to Charlotte and David, his gaze piercing. "Charlotte," he began, his voice low yet carrying across the room. "How could you?" Charlotte's eyes filled with tears, her lips trembling as she searched for words. "Daniel, I don't." Daniel interrupted, his tone cutting like a knife through the tension. "Don't you dare." David shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting around the room, but he remained silent, unsure how to respond to the escalating confrontation. "I saw you," Daniel continued, his voice rising slightly. "I saw you with him, Charlotte, in that corner, sharing secrets that weren't ours to share." Charlotte's face flushed with shame as murmurs spread through the room. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to intervene or simply bear witness to the unraveling of a once happy couple. "Daniel, I'm sorry," Charlotte whispered, tears now streaming down her cheeks. "It was a mistake." "A mistake?" Daniel scoffed bitterly. "No, Charlotte, this is more than a mistake. This is a betrayal." The weight of his words hung in the air, a heavy silence settling over the room. Charlotte looked around, her heart sinking as she realized the gravity of the situation. She opened her mouth to speak, but Daniel's next words stopped her cold. "I can't do this anymore," Daniel said quietly, his voice breaking with emotion. "I can't pretend everything's okay when it's not." Mia stepped forward, her voice gentle yet firm. "Daniel, maybe we should take this somewhere private." But Daniel shook his head, his eyes never leaving Charlotte's. "No, Mia, she made this public. Let everyone see the truth." Charlotte's shoulders slumped, defeated. "Please, Daniel," she pleaded, her voice barely a whisper now. "Please don't." But Daniel turned away, unable to bear the sight of her tears any longer. With one last glance at the stunned faces of their friends, he walked out of the room, leaving behind a shattered marriage and a room filled with unanswered questions. Charlotte stood there, her hands trembling, as Mia moved to comfort her. David hovered uncertainly nearby, the weight of guilt heavy on his shoulders, knowing he played a part in the unraveling of something once beautiful. In that moment, amidst the whispers and sympathetic glances, Charlotte realized the irreversible damage caused by a single moment of indiscretion. The consequences of her actions had reshaped her future in ways she never could have imagined. The days following the party were a whirlwind of chaos and despair for Charlotte. Rumors swirled through their social circle like a relentless storm, fueled by the shocking events of that fateful night. Friends whispered behind hands, casting pitying glances at Charlotte as she navigated through the remnants of her shattered marriage. At her lawyer's office, Charlotte sat nervously, her hands trembling in her lap. Across from her, her attorney, Ms. Ramirez, reviewed the legal documents with a grave expression. "Charlotte, I won't sugarcoat it," Ms. Ramirez began gently. "The public confrontation at Mia's party has escalated matters. There's talk of defamation and emotional distress claims." Charlotte's heart sank, the weight of her actions crashing down on her. "But I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she murmured, tears welling in her eyes. Ms. Ramirez nodded sympathetically. "I understand, Charlotte, but Daniel's accusations were public, and the damage to his reputation and your own is substantial." Charlotte swallowed hard, trying to hold back tears of regret. "What do I do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ms. Ramirez leaned forward, her tone earnest. "We'll need to prepare a strong defense. I'll handle the legal aspects, but you also need to be prepared for the social fallout. It won't be easy, but we'll get through this together." As the legal proceedings loomed ahead, Charlotte found herself grappling not only with the potential legal consequences, but also with the harsh reality of her tarnished reputation. Friends she once considered close now kept their distance, unsure how to approach her amidst the scandal. One afternoon, Charlotte received a call from Mia, her voice tentative yet filled with concern. "Charlotte, how are you holding up?" Charlotte sighed, her throat tight with emotion. It's been tough, Mia. I never imagined things would unravel like this." Mia paused, choosing her words carefully. "I'm here for you, Charlotte. We all make mistakes, but you'll get through this." Despite Mia's words of comfort, Charlotte couldn't shake the gnawing guilt and regret that consumed her. The consequences of her moment of weakness had reshaped her life in ways she never could have anticipated. As the weeks turned into months, Charlotte's life became a blur of legal meetings, whispered conversations, and nights spent alone in her once happy home. Each day brought new challenges as she navigated the fallout of her actions, wondering if she would ever find redemption amidst the ruins of her marriage and reputation. In the quiet moments, when the world outside seemed to hold its breath, Charlotte reflected on the choices that led her to this point. She knew the road ahead would be long and arduous, but somewhere deep within, a flicker of hope remained. A hope that someday, she might find a way to rebuild what she had lost and emerge stronger from the ashes of her mistakes. Weeks had passed since that tumultuous night at Mia's party, yet for Daniel and Charlotte, the emotional turmoil showed no signs of easing. Their once solid marriage now lay fractured, trust shattered into irreparable pieces. In the dimly lit living room of their home, Daniel sat across from Charlotte, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. His hands clenched into fists, betraying the storm of emotions raging within him. Daniel, Charlotte began tentatively, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry. Daniel looked up, his eyes weary and filled with pain. Sorry doesn't fix this, Charlotte, he replied, his voice strained. You've broken us. Tears welled in Charlotte's eyes as she reached out towards him, her hand hovering uncertainly in the space between them. I never meant to hurt you, she murmured, her voice thick with regret. Daniel shook his head, his jaw clenched. But you did, Charlotte, you did. The room fell silent once more, the weight of their words hanging in the air like a suffocating fog. Outside, the world continued to spin, oblivious to the wreckage of their marriage left in its wake. Days turned into weeks as they navigated the aftermath. Friends once considered their closest confidants now tiptoed around them, unsure how to bridge the chasm that had opened between Daniel and Charlotte. Some offered tentative support, while others chose to distance themselves from the scandal that had rocked their social circle. One evening, Charlotte found herself sitting alone at a cafe, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold in front of her. She stared out the window, watching the bustling city streets, her thoughts a jumble of guilt and despair. A familiar voice interrupted her reverie. Charlotte. She turned to see Mia standing there, concern etched on her face. Mia, Charlotte murmured, forcing a weak smile. I wasn't expecting to see you. Mia took a seat opposite Charlotte, her expression sympathetic. How are you holding up? Charlotte looked down at her hands, her heart heavy. It's been hard, she admitted, tears welling up once more. I never imagined things would fall apart like this. Mia reached out, squeezing Charlotte's hand in a gesture of solidarity. I know, she said softly, but you're not alone, Charlotte. We're all here for you, no matter what. Despite Mia's words of comfort, Charlotte couldn't shake the feeling of isolation that had settled over her like a suffocating blanket. She knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with obstacles, but somewhere within her fractured heart, a glimmer of hope remained. A hope that someday, she and Daniel might find a way to heal the wounds of their shattered marriage and rebuild the trust that had been lost. As the days turned into weeks, Charlotte and Daniel continued to navigate their separate paths, each grappling with their own demons and searching for a semblance of peace amidst the wreckage of their once happy life together. The days blurred together for Daniel and Charlotte, consumed by the harsh realities of their impending divorce. Lawyers became their new confidants, navigating the intricate labyrinth of legal proceedings that now defined their fractured relationship. In a sterile conference room, Daniel sat across from his attorney, Mr. Thompson, his hands clenched tightly on the polished table. So what's the latest, Mr. Thompson? He asked, his voice strained with exhaustion. Mr. Thompson sighed, flipping through a stack of legal documents. Charlotte's legal team has proposed a custody arrangement, he began, his tone professional yet tinged with empathy. They're pushing for joint custody with primary residence being considered for Charlotte. Daniel's jaw tightened, his mind racing with the implications. And the assets? Mr. Thompson nodded solemnly. We're still negotiating, but it looks like they're aiming for a 50-50 split. Across town, Charlotte sat in a similar conference room, her attorney, Ms. Ramirez, outlining the latest developments in their case. Daniel's team is pushing for supervised visitation, Ms. Ramirez explained, her voice measured. They're concerned about the incident at Mia's party. Charlotte's heart sank, the weight of her actions bearing down on her. But I've been a good mother, she insisted, her voice trembling. I've always put our children first. Ms. Ramirez nodded, understanding the stakes. We'll fight for what's fair, Charlotte, but we need to be prepared for a tough battle. As the weeks passed, Daniel and Charlotte found themselves immersed in a sea of legal battles, each negotiation and court appearance a stark reminder of their shattered marriage. Custody evaluations, financial disclosures, and mediation sessions filled their days, leaving little room for anything but the relentless pursuit of legal resolution. At home, Daniel stared at the divorce papers spread out on the kitchen table, the weight of each decision pressing down on him like a heavy burden. He glanced at a framed photo of happier times, Charlotte's radiant smile captured in a moment of pure joy. A lump formed in his throat as he realized how far they had drifted from that idyllic image. Charlotte, too, found herself lost in a haze of paperwork and legal jargon. The future she had once envisioned slipping further from her grasp with each legal document signed. She traced her finger over their wedding band, now resting on her bedside table, a silent testament to the love that had once bound them together. Amidst the chaos of legal battles and emotional turmoil, Daniel and Charlotte clung to fragments of their shared past, a past now overshadowed by the harsh realities of divorce and the painful unraveling of their once unbreakable bond. Each legal document signed felt like another nail in the coffin of their shared past, pushing them further apart even as they struggled to find a way forward, alone. The divorce papers lay on the table between them, a stark reminder of the life they once shared. Daniel and Charlotte sat in silence, the weight of their decision heavy in the air. It was their final meeting with the lawyers, the legal proceedings now behind them, but the emotional scars still fresh and raw. Daniel rubbed his temples, struggling to process the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside him. "So, that's it then?" he asked finally, his voice devoid of its usual strength. His attorney nodded solemnly. "Yes, Daniel, the divorce will be finalized in a few weeks." Charlotte sat across from him, her eyes downcast. She had lost weight in the months since the party, her once vibrant energy now subdued by the weight of guilt and regret. "I'm sorry, Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling, "for everything." Daniel looked up, meeting her gaze for the first time in what felt like an eternity. "I know," he replied quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry too." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the court clerk with the final documents. Daniel signed first, his signature a stark line on the page. Charlotte followed suit, her hand trembling slightly as she held the pen. As the clerk collected the papers and left the room, Daniel and Charlotte sat in silence once more, the reality of life post-divorce settling around them like a heavy fog. In the weeks that followed, Daniel struggled to rebuild his life without Charlotte by his side. Their once shared home felt empty and unfamiliar, haunted by memories of a happier time. He threw himself into work, seeking solace in the routine and familiarity of his career, yet unable to escape the gnawing ache of betrayal that lingered in the corners of his mind. Charlotte, on the other hand, faced a different kind of struggle, once vibrant and sociable. She found herself isolated and stigmatized by the affair that had shattered her marriage. Friends who once stood by her now kept their distance, unsure how to reconcile the person they knew with the actions that had torn apart Daniel's trust. One evening, Charlotte sat alone in her apartment, the silence echoing around her like a cavernous void. She scrolled through old photos on her phone, tears streaming down her cheeks as she relived moments of happiness now tinged with sorrow. A knock at the door startled her out of her reverie. She opened it cautiously to find Mia standing there, a sympathetic smile on her face. "Charlotte," Mia began softly, "I heard about the divorce. How are you holding up?" Charlotte swallowed hard, struggling to find words. It's been tough," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never thought my life would turn out like this." Mia stepped inside, enveloping Charlotte in a comforting embrace. "I'm here for you, Charlotte," she said gently. "We all make mistakes, it's how we learn and grow." As Mia held her close, Charlotte felt a glimmer of hope amidst the wreckage of her shattered marriage. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she also knew that with time and forgiveness, both from others and herself, she might find a way to rebuild her life and rediscover the person she once was, before everything fell apart. Months had passed since the finalization of their divorce, and Daniel and Charlotte were each forging their own paths toward healing and self-discovery. In his office, overlooking the city skyline, Daniel stared at the computer screen, his mind focused on the intricate details of a new project. The past months had been a blur of long hours and relentless determination, channeling his anger and heartbreak into professional success. His career had become a refuge, a place where he could bury himself in work and temporarily escape the pain that still lingered in the corners of his heart. His phone buzzed with a message from his colleague, prompting him to review the latest draft. As he delved into the task at hand, Daniel found a sense of purpose and fulfillment that had eluded him since the unraveling of his marriage. He threw himself into every project with renewed vigor, determined to prove to himself, and perhaps to the world, that he was more than the sum of his shattered dreams. Meanwhile, across town, Charlotte sat in a cozy therapist's office, the soft glow of the afternoon sun filtering through the curtains. Dr. Martinez listened attentively as Charlotte recounted the events that had led to the end of her marriage. Her voice tinged with regret and sorrow. "I never meant to hurt him," Charlotte admitted, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "But I was lost, Dr. Martinez. I didn't know how to communicate what I was feeling." Dr. Martinez nodded sympathetically, her gentle gaze encouraging Charlotte to continue. "It's understandable, Charlotte. Infidelity often stems from deeper emotional needs that aren't being met." Tears welled in Charlotte's eyes as she confronted the painful truths unearthed in therapy. The insecurities, the longing for validation, the fear of vulnerability that had driven her into the arms of another man. With Dr. Martinez's guidance, Charlotte began to unravel the tangled threads of her past, slowly piecing together a new understanding of herself and her desires. Outside the therapist's office, Charlotte took tentative steps toward rebuilding her life. She joined a support group for individuals navigating post-divorce challenges, finding comfort in shared experiences and newfound friendships. She enrolled in art classes, rediscovering a long-neglected passion for creativity that had once defined her sense of self. As the months turned into a new year, Daniel and Charlotte found themselves on separate yet parallel journeys of healing and self-discovery. The pain of their shared past still lingered, a constant reminder of the love they had lost. But amidst the wreckage of their shattered marriage, they both began to glimpse the possibility of new beginnings, a chance to redefine themselves, to heal old wounds, and to forge a path toward a future filled with hope and possibility. Years had passed since the tumultuous events that had reshaped their lives forever. Daniel and Charlotte found themselves in unexpected places, their paths diverging yet forever intertwined by the scars of their past. In a quaint cafe downtown, Daniel stirred his coffee absently, his gaze drifting out the window to the bustling street beyond. Beside him, Mia sat with a warm smile, her hand reaching out to touch his. "You've come a long way, Daniel," Mia remarked softly, her eyes filled with admiration. "I'm proud of you." Daniel nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "It hasn't been easy," he admitted, his voice tinged with reflection, "but I've learned a lot along the way." Mia squeezed his hand gently, her expression filled with understanding. "You deserve happiness, Daniel," she said earnestly. "We all do." Across town, Charlotte sat in a sunlit garden, a sketchbook open on her lap as she captured the delicate beauty of a blooming flower. Beside her, Mark watched with quiet admiration, his presence a source of comfort and stability she had once thought lost forever. "You've grown so much, Charlotte," Mark remarked softly, his voice carrying across the tranquil garden. "I admire your strength." Charlotte glanced up, meeting his gaze with a grateful smile. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted, her heart swelling with affection. "You've shown me what love should be." Mark reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "We all have scars," he said gently, "but they remind us of where we've been and how far we've come." As the years had passed, Daniel and Charlotte had each found new love, tempered by the lessons learned from their tumultuous past. The scars of betrayal remained, a constant reminder of the fragility of trust and the consequences of misplaced desires. Yet, in the quiet moments of reflection, they found a quiet resilience, a strength forged from the ashes of their shattered marriage. Their story had become a cautionary tale, a testament to the complexities of love and the importance of honesty and communication. It was a journey marked by pain and heartache, but also by growth and redemption. And as they looked towards the future, Daniel and Charlotte knew that they had found a measure of peace, a chance to embrace new beginnings and to cherish the love that had found them once more, wiser and more grateful than they had ever been before.